the ghost of California State University Channel Islands. There are places built for healing, and then there are places that never fully heal. In Camarillo, California, surrounded by palm trees and coastal winds, stands a university campus known for its beauty and peaceful atmosphere. But before it was a university, it was something else, something darker, something that left behind whispers in the walls. Today, students walk the quiet corridors of unaware that long before classrooms and lecture halls, the land was once home to the Camarillo State Mental Hospital, and among its many forgotten patients, one name still lingers: Charlie Parker. Not the jazz legend, but another man, a man whose story never truly ended. The campus office serene, red-roofed Spanish-style buildings, manicured lawns, ocean air drifting inland. But beneath the sunlight lies history few students fully understand. From 1936 to 1997, this property operated as Camarillo State Mental Hospital, one of California's largest psychiatric institutions. Thousands of patients lived here. Some were treated, some were forgotten, and some never left. Official records are incomplete, but archived staff documents mention a patient admitted in the late 1940s named Charles Parker. He was in his early 30s, diagnosed with severe paranoia and auditory hallucinations. Staff described him as quiet but intensely observant. He believed someone was watching him at all times. Ironically, decades later, students would say the same thing. Charlie reportedly spent much of his time staring out of windows, whispering to himself. He claimed there was a man in the walls. Doctors dismissed it as delusion, but Charlie insisted the man walked the halls at night, boots scraping tile, keys rattling, breathing heavy in the dark. He said the building itself was alive, listening. In 1952, hospital logs note something strange. Charlie Parker was assigned to Ward C. One night during routine head count, he was gone. No broken windows, no forced doors, no signs of struggle, just an empty bed. Staff searched the grounds for days, the surrounding fields, nearby orchards, nothing. His file was quietly marked as presumed escaped. But longtime nurses whispered another theory. They believed Charlie never left. They believed he was still inside the building. When the hospital closed in 1997, renovations began. In 2002, the property reopened as fresh paint covered old walls, dorm rooms replaced patient wards, lecture halls replaced therapy rooms, but construction workers reported odd occurrences during renovations. Tools moved overnight, lights flickered in unused wings, and more than one worker claimed to hear whispering in empty corridors. One construction supervisor quit after insisting he saw a thin man standing behind a sealed doorway, a doorway that led to nothing. Within the first year of student housing, reports began. Footsteps in hallways at 3 a.m., doors opening slowly without wind, cold spots in warm rooms. But the most disturbing detail, students describing a thin man watching them from doorways, always at a distance, never approaching. One sophomore reported waking up to the feeling of being observed. She opened her eyes. At the foot of her bed stood a pale figure in outdated hospital clothing. He was barefoot, thin, eyes sunken. She blinked. He was gone. Several dorm residents in the oldest wing, once part of the hospital, began hearing scratching sounds inside the walls. Not rats, not plumbing, scratching. Slow, deliberate, followed by faint whispering. One student pressed his ear to the wall and heard a phrase repeated softly. "He's still here." Campus maintenance inspected the walls. Nothing. No animals. No loose pipes. But the whispers continued for weeks. In 2014, campus security reviewed footage after a series of fire alarms triggered overnight. At 3:12 a.m., cameras captured movement in a hallway that was completely empty. A shadow moved against the wall, but there was nobody casting it. Moments later, the fire alarm pulled itself down. Security found the plastic cover shattered on the floor. No fingerprints, no forced entry. The timestamp froze at 3:12 a.m. before cutting to static. There is a lower level beneath one of the older buildings, a space not frequently used. Originally part of the hospital's utility system, a small group of students once entered out of curiosity. What they found disturbed them deeply. Old tiles, rusting pipes, and faint writing etched into concrete. Scratched into the wall were the words, "They won't let me leave." The date beneath it read, 1952. The same year Charlie Parker vanished. Multiple students reported similar nightmares. They dreamed of wandering long hospital corridors. Fluorescent lights flickering, doors slamming behind them. At the end of the hallway stood a thin man staring at them. When they tried to run, their feet felt heavy. In the dream, he would whisper, "You see me now." Then they would wake up, always at 3:12 a.m. Even professors have quietly shared experiences. One faculty member staying late grading papers reported hearing a soft knock on her office door. When she opened it, no one. But across the hallway, she saw a reflection in the glass of a tall, thin man standing behind her. She turned. Empty hallway. When she looked back at the glass, he was closer, then gone. Paranormal researchers believe Charlie Parker may not have escaped at all. Some speculate he died within the building, accidentally sealed during renovations decades earlier. Others believe his spirit lingers because he was never believed. He warned of something in the walls, and now students hear scratching in those same walls. Perhaps Charlie wasn't paranoid. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps something was always there. And when the hospital closed, it stayed. In 2021, a resident advisor reported the most chilling encounter yet. She was doing late-night rounds when she heard soft crying coming from a locked study room. She unlocked the door. The room was empty, but the air felt heavy, oppressive. Then she heard it behind her. Footsteps, slow, bare feet on tile. She turned. Standing at the end of the hallway was a pale figure, thin, hospital gown hanging loosely, eyes hollow. He stared at her, and in a broken whisper said, "They never found me." The lights flickered violently. When they stabilized, the hallway was empty. Security cameras in that corridor malfunctioned at the exact same moment. Timestamp 3:12 a.m. Today stands as a place of education and opportunity. Students laugh, they study, they build futures. But late at night, when the ocean wind quiets and the campus grows still, some say you can hear faint scratching inside the walls. And sometimes, if you look down a long, empty hallway, you might see a thin figure watching you, waiting to be believed. If you ever visit California State University, Channel Islands, and you wake up at exactly 3:12 a.m., don't listen for the scratching, don't check the hallway, because some patients never checked out. And some stories were never meant to end. Bridgewater State University. There are places where knowledge is meant to grow. Libraries filled with silence, dormitories filled with laughter, hallways filled with ambition. But sometimes, those hallways are filled with something else. In Bridgewater, Massachusetts, a quiet university campus carries a reputation that most schools try to avoid. Because inside one of its oldest residence halls, students have reported footsteps with no source, doors that lock themselves, and the presence of someone known only by one name, George. This is the true legend of, and the chilling mystery of the Woodward ghost. To understand the haunting, you must first understand the land. Sits within an area long associated with unexplained phenomena, the infamous Bridgewater Triangle. For decades, locals have reported strange lights in the sky, shadow figures in the woods, and unexplained disappearances. And at the heart of this region stands the university. Beautiful during the day, unsettling at night. Particularly one building, Woodward Hall. Woodward Hall is one of the campus's oldest dormitories. Brick exterior, narrow stairwells, long corridors that echo even the smallest sound. Students often describe it as charming, but those who live there long enough describe it differently. Heavy, oppressive, as if someone is watching. For decades, residents have reported a presence known simply as George. No last name, no confirmed identity, just George. There are many theories. Some say George was a former student who died unexpectedly in the building. Others claim he was a maintenance worker who suffered a fatal accident decades ago. But the most persistent story suggests something darker. Local lore tells of a young man who took his own life inside Woodward Hall many years ago. His name, according to whispered accounts, was George. University archives contain no publicly accessible record confirming this, but students insist the spirit of George remains. And he is not subtle. The earliest reported encounters date back several decades. Students living on upper floors began noticing small disturbances, lights flickering, radios turning on by themselves, knocks on doors with no one outside. One student reported her alarm clock resetting to 3:07 a.m. every night. No matter how many times she unplugged it, 3:07 a.m. every single morning. In the early 2000s, a group of roommates experienced something far more aggressive. Their dorm room door would not stay closed, even when locked. They tested it repeatedly. The latch worked perfectly. Yet each night, around 3 a.m., the door slowly creaked open. One night, they decided to film it. At 3:06 a.m., the handle turned, slowly, deliberately. The door opened halfway. The hallway outside was empty, but the room temperature dropped dramatically. One roommate whispered, "George?" The door slammed shut. The recording ended abruptly. The battery drained instantly. One of the most famous Woodward Hall stories involves a bunk bed. A student sleeping on the top bunk woke up unable to move. Sleep paralysis, perhaps. But what happened next terrified her. She felt the bed shake, not violently, but rhythmically, as if someone was climbing up the ladder. She couldn't turn her head, but she felt weight pressing near her feet. Then a whisper, soft, male, close to her ear. "Why are you in my room?" When she finally broke free from paralysis, the room was empty. Her roommate on the lower bunk was still asleep, but the ladder was slightly swaying. Though Woodward Hall is not a towering building, it does have a small elevator. Multiple residents have reported it stopping at random floors late at night. Doors opening. No one there. One night, a student entered the elevator alone. Pressed the button for the first floor. Instead, the elevator moved upward, stopping at the top level. Doors opened slowly, the hallway lights flickered, and at the end of the corridor stood a shadowed figure, tall, still, watching. The student frantically pressed the close button. The doors shut. The elevator descended on its own. When she reported it, maintenance found no malfunction. Several students describe hearing 3 knocks on their walls, always 3, never more, never less. Late at night, they assumed it was neighbors, until they knocked back. 3 knocks responded immediately. From inside the wall, campus maintenance inspected plumbing and structural systems. No explanation. But one resident made a disturbing connection. 3 knocks. 3:07 a.m. Always 3. A former resident assistant shared one of the most detailed accounts. She was alone during winter break, checking rooms. Most students had left campus. Woodward Hall was nearly empty. As she walked down the 3rd-floor hallway, she heard footsteps behind her. Slow, dragging slightly. She turned. No one. She continued walking. The footsteps followed. She stopped. The footsteps stopped. She whispered, "George!" The lights flickered, and at the far end of the hallway, she saw a figure. Faint, transparent, standing beside a dorm room door. It tilted its head slightly, then vanished. She requested reassignment the following semester. In 2018, campus police reviewed footage after a student reported being locked out of her room. The camera showed her attempting to open the door. Suddenly, the door opened inward, forcefully, though no one was inside. The student stumbled backward. Moments later, her belongings were thrown from inside the room into the hallway. One by one, as if someone invisible was pushing them. The footage later developed static interference at 3:07 a.m., the exact time the incident occurred. Some paranormal investigators believe George may not be violent, just territorial. Woodward Hall was once entirely male housing. Perhaps George feels displaced. Perhaps he does not understand that decades have passed. Or perhaps he resents the living. Some psychics who visited the building claimed to sense sadness more than anger, a loneliness that lingers in the walls, a presence pacing hallways, waiting for recognition. In 2022, a senior student decided to test the legend. He sat alone in the hallway at 3 a.m. with a voice recorder. He spoke clearly. "George, if you're here, knock 3 times. Silence, then 3 distinct knocks from the wall beside him. He continued recording. "Why are you still here?" A faint response came through the static, not audible in the moment, but when played back later, a whisper. "Still mine." The student transferred the following semester. Today continues as a thriving campus. Students study, they socialize, they build their futures. But inside Woodward Hall, the legend remains alive. At 3:07 a.m., some doors still creak open, some lights still flicker, and sometimes, if you whisper his name, you might hear 3 knocks in return. Because George may never have left. If you ever find yourself staying in Woodward Hall, and you wake up at exactly 3:07 a.m., don't knock back, don't say his name, because some spirits are still listening, and some rooms still belong to George. Penn State University. On a quiet campus in Pennsylvania, where traditions run deep and history is honored in stone and bronze, there stands a skeleton, not a replica, not a Halloween prop, a real mule skeleton, and nearby, the statue of a woman who never truly left. Students at Pennsylvania State University whisper that if you walk past Old Coley at night, you can hear hooves echoing on stone. And if you look too long at the statue of Frances Atherton, she might look back. This is the chilling legend of Old Coley and Frances Atherton. College campuses are built on memory. Every building carries a story. Every statue represents someone who shaped the future. But sometimes, those stories refuse to stay in the past. At Penn State, two legends stand at the center of campus folklore. Old Coley, a hard-working mule whose bones remain on display, and Frances Atherton, the wife of the university's founder, whose statue watches over the grounds. Individually, their stories are historical. Together, they've become something else. In 1857, long before modern classrooms and stadium lights, Penn State was just farmland and ambition. The university's founder, Evan Pugh, needed a reliable animal to haul limestone and supplies for the construction of the early campus. So he purchased a mule, a dark-coated, strong, stubborn mule. Students would later nickname him Old Coley. For years, Coley carried stone, bricks, timber, the literal weight of the university on his back. He became a familiar sight across campus, hooves striking earth, breath visible in winter air, harness creaking under strain. He was more than an animal. He was part of the foundation. Old Coley died in 1893, but instead of burying him quietly, students decided to preserve him. His skeleton was carefully cleaned and mounted. Today, Old Coley's bones stand on display inside the Hub Robeson Center at Penn State. A preserved mule, standing forever, watching. Students laugh when they pass him. They take photos. They joke about campus traditions. But after midnight, the mood changes. For decades, students have reported strange experiences near Old Coley's skeleton. Security guards working late shifts describe hearing slow, heavy hoof steps echoing through empty hallways. Some claim they've heard a low, strained breath, like an exhausted animal pulling weight. Others swear they've seen shadows move near the skeleton display when no one else was inside the building. One janitor reportedly quit after claiming the bones rattled on their own. Metal hooks creaking, glass cases vibrating, as if something inside those bones still remembered labor, still remembered burden. To understand the second half of this legend, we go back further, to the wife of Penn State's founder. Frances Atherton was known as the First Lady of Penn State. She wasn't just a supportive spouse. She played an active role in campus life. She welcomed students, encouraged education for women, helped shape the early spirit of the university. When she died in 1908, her legacy was honored. Her statue now stands near the heart of campus, graceful, composed, hands gently folded, watching, always watching. It started as whispers. Students walking past the statue late at night reported feeling observed, not in a symbolic way, in a literal one. Some claim the statue's eyes seem to follow them. Others insist her facial expression changes depending on the hour, smiling during the day, stern at night. One student claimed that during finals week, while studying nearby at 3 a.m., she looked up and saw condensation forming near the statue, as if someone had just exhaled in cold air. But there was no one there. Separately, Old Coley and Frances Atherton are beloved historical figures. But students began noticing something strange. Reports of paranormal activity seemed strongest on nights when both locations were quiet and nearly empty. Some claim that if you stand near Francis Atherton's statue at midnight and then walk immediately to Old Coley's display, you'll feel a sudden drop in temperature, like stepping into a memory that doesn't belong to you. There's a campus legend that says Francis Atherton's spirit still roams, ensuring the university remains safe. And Old Coley, he still works, still patrols, still carries invisible weight. One winter night, a brief campus-wide power outage plunged parts of Penn State into darkness. Inside the hub, emergency lights flickered. A security guard doing rounds reported hearing loud banging near Old Coley's display. Not subtle rattling, violent movement. When backup lights restored partial visibility, the guard found nothing disturbed. Except the skeleton had shifted slightly, one hoof angled differently than before. Maintenance later insisted it was impossible without tools, but no tools were found. Students living on campus have reported vivid dreams involving a dark mule running across an empty field, and a woman standing at the edge of the field, watching, not frightened, not distressed, simply observing. In these dreams, the mule always stops at the edge of a half-built structure, straining, as if trying to finish construction. But it never does, and the woman never intervenes. Skeptics argue it's simple psychology. When you preserve bones in a public building, imagination fills the gaps. When a statue represents a respected historical figure, emotional attachment enhances perception. Add late-night stress, exams, exhaustion, and the brain creates ghosts. But believers ask, why do reports remain consistent over decades? Why the hooves? Why the breath? Why the watchful feeling? There's an unofficial campus tradition. If you whisper a secret to Old Coley before graduation, he will carry your burden for you. If you thank Francis Atherton before finals, she will grant clarity. Most treat it as harmless fun. But a former student once claimed that after mocking the tradition, she heard hooves following her across an empty quad. Slow, deliberate, matching her pace. She never looked back. Imagine walking alone through campus at 2:17 a.m., snow falling softly, lights dim. You pass Francis Atherton's statue. You feel it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. You quicken your pace toward the hub. Inside, Old Coley stands under soft lighting, silent, still. But just as you turn away, you hear it. A single hoof step behind you. And when you look back, for the briefest second, the skeleton's skull is angled slightly downward, as if staring directly at you. Old Coley remains on display. Francis Atherton's statue remains in place. Penn State thrives. Students graduate. Life moves forward, but history has weight. And sometimes, that weight doesn't rest easily. Fordham University's darkest dorm. In the Bronx, New York, behind iron gates and towering Gothic buildings, there is a dormitory where students refuse to sleep with the lights off. A place where doors lock on their own, where footsteps echo in empty stairwells, and where a shadow stands at the end of the hallway, watching. It is not the oldest building on campus, not the most historic, but at Fordham University, there is one residence hall students speak about in whispers, Finley Hall. And after midnight, it does not feel like student housing. It feels like something else entirely. Fordham University's Rose Hill campus is known for its beauty, Gothic architecture, stone towers, quiet courtyards. At night, the campus grows still. The trees barely move. The air feels heavy. And at the center of student life stands Finley Hall. Built in the 1960s, Finley Hall was meant to house generations of students. It was modern compared to other campus buildings. Functional, practical, unremarkable, at least on the surface. But within years of its opening, stories began. The earliest reports came from resident assistants, late-night rounds, empty hallways. But doors would be found open, though they had just been locked. One RA reported hearing 3 slow knocks on a door at 2:13 a.m. When she checked, the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no retreating sound, just silence. The knocks would repeat, always 3. Students began avoiding the elevator after midnight. It would stop on random floors. Open, wait. No one there. Sometimes it would ascend to the top floor without being called. When doors opened, cold air would rush inside. One student claimed she saw a tall, dark shape standing in the corner reflection of the elevator mirror. When she turned, nothing. But the doors refused to close for nearly 20 seconds, as if waiting for someone else to enter. The most consistent description across decades is a shadow figure. Tall, thin, standing at the far end of the hallway, often near the emergency exit stairwell. Witnesses say it does not move. It simply watches. When approached, it dissolves into darkness. Students who've seen it describe overwhelming dread. Not panic, not aggression, just a feeling that something deeply wrong is present. There is a rumor that during the early years of Finley Hall, a student died by suicide inside the building. Some say it happened in a stairwell, others say in a dorm room. Official records are unclear, but the legend persists, and many believe the Shadow Man is tied to the tragedy. A residual presence, a replay of despair. Certain rooms gain reputations. Room 414 is one of them. Multiple occupants report lights flickering at exactly 3:07 a.m. Closet doors opening slowly. Objects moving off desks. One student woke to find her desk chair positioned directly beside her bed, facing her, though she had pushed it under the desk. She transferred at the end of the semester. Students describe hearing whispers in the hallway late at night. Not conversations, just faint, unintelligible murmurs. If you step into the hallway to investigate, the whispers stop. One student recorded audio while studging. On playback, beneath the hum of her fan, a voice can be heard saying, "Stay." She had been alone. The stairwell is perhaps the most avoided area. Dim lighting, concrete walls, echoing footsteps. Several students claim they've heard someone running up the stairs behind them. Fast, heavy. When they step aside, no one passes. One student felt a hand brush her shoulder while descending. She was alone. Campus security once reviewed footage after repeated complaints. At 2:48 a.m., a camera captured a dark mass at the end of a hallway. It appeared human-shaped, standing motionless. Seconds later, it flickered, then vanished. Security labeled it camera interference. But the guard monitoring that shift requested reassignment the following week. Certain corners of Finley Hall are inexplicably cold, even during summer. Students report visible breath in specific hallway sections. Maintenance found no ventilation issues, no broken insulation, just cold air, lingering, still. One sophomore described brushing her teeth when she saw someone standing behind her in the bathroom mirror. Tall, head tilted slightly, no visible facial features, just darkness. She spun around, no one there. But in the mirror, the figure remained for 2 full seconds before fading. In 2018, a fire alarm triggered at 3:03 a.m. Students evacuated, but no smoke, no fire. Later, security found that the alarm pull station on the third floor had been activated, yet no fingerprints were found. Students on that floor reported hearing running footsteps minutes before the alarm, as if someone wanted them out. Fordham is a Jesuit university. Religious history runs deep. Some speculate that spiritual sensitivity on campus amplifies phenomena. Is the entity attached to Finlay Hall or drawn to the spiritual atmosphere of the campus? There are no answers, only patterns. In 2021, a student studying alone in the lounge fell asleep. She woke to darkness. The lights had turned off. The hallway outside was silent. As she stood, she noticed something at the end of the corridor. The shadow man, closer than ever before, standing near the exit. She froze. The figure tilted its head slightly. And then, all lights flickered simultaneously. When they stabilized, it was gone. Unlike aggressive hauntings, Finlay Hall's presence does not chase. It does not attack. It observes, appears, disappears, as though replaying something or waiting. Students often describe feeling watched most when they are alone, most vulnerable, most quiet. Finlay Hall remains fully operational. Students laugh, study, sleep, live. But at night, when the Bronx quiets, when traffic fades, when campus lights dim, the hallway grows still. And at the far end, sometimes something stands, watching. If you ever visit Fordham University after dark, and you walk past Finlay Hall, look carefully at the upper windows. If you see a shadow standing behind the glass, do not wave. Do not stare too long, because some dormitories house more than students, and some shadows are not caused by light. If you enjoyed this true haunted dorm story, subscribe for more real university horror legends. Comment below. Would you live in Finlay Hall for one semester? And remember, if you hear 3 knocks at your door after midnight, don't answer.